What's up, fantasy people? Today, I'm going to be helping you decide which wide receiver should be in your starting fantasy lineup. That means we got the top 5 best and the top 5 worst wide receiver cornerback matchups heading into week 2 of the NFL. First off, man, we got Amon-Ra St. Brown, only 8 fantasy points last week. That is going to change. 83.4% route participation. That is that first column. Elite is 90%, so we need that to go higher and higher. But I think by the end of the year, it will. And hey, they do put him all around. He is on the outside 50% of the time and in the slot a little bit over 50% of the time. I know that's over 100%, but I'm rounding here. All right. But he is the slot wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. He gets a 25.4% target share. I know he had a bad week, but still, man, 1 out of every 4 passes when he was running routes, he was targeted. That is ridiculous. We want 24 plus. And these are, this is the target share when he is actually running routes on the field. When you're off the field, it is not counting it against you. Next column, dude, fantasy points per route run. You start getting it in elite territory, about 0.55 fantasy points per route run. This fool is at 0.61. Holy shit. So I know down week, but again, he was just not running a ton of routes last week. Chicago, okay, also, anyways, matchup advantage columns. We're not going to pay too much attention to that. It gets subjective, and we just want hard facts, okay? So he's going against his matchup this week. Chicago secondary. You're thinking, holy shit, I don't want anything to do with this. Well, he gets Chicago's worst cornerback right now, the worst cornerback in the league, Nick McCloud. He is in the slot 60% of the time. And hey, he's getting targeted only 13.3% of the time. So you can look right here. All these other bad cornerbacks were being targeted a lot. This guy was not targeted so much. My Vikings, dude, we're not doing too well until like the 4th quarter, okay? So when they did succeed, when they were successful, it was at Nick McCloud late in the game. I'm thinking that Justin Jefferson touchdown was over the middle, out of the slot too. I'd have to rewatch that. But still, this cornerback is the worst in the NFL, giving up 0.41 fantasy points per route run. Amon-Ra St. Brown, if the Detroit Lions have a bounce-back game, he will be the reason, okay? Next up, Devonta Smith. 92% route participation versus the Cowboys last week? That is insane. Love it. He is in the slot most of the time. 19.9% target share. Again, we want that to be 24% when he's out there running routes, but this team does not throw the ball. They like to run a lot. 0.52 fantasy points per route run. So when he got the ball, he was almost elite, okay? It needs to be matched up with Kansas City's worst cornerback, their slot cornerback, Shamari Connor. He plays in the slot 85% of the time, so Devonta Smith will see him at least 62% of the time, and he's given up 0.39 fantasy points per route run, and he was targeted almost 21% of the time. Last year, the highest targeted cornerback was around 21%. So that is elite as far as I'm talking about bad cornerbacks and offenses realizing that and targeting them. So give me some Devonta Smith this week. And then I know you paid a lot for this guy on the waiver wire. Kayshon Boutte, this fool's only like 23 years old. I was just reading some more stuff about him today. Very promising career, 80.5% route participation last week. He needs to be 85+% to really hit that ceiling that we want. And he's on the outside, all right? 90% of the time, only in the slot, 10%, where if he was a slot wide receiver, that is like the running back, Travion Henderson, and Hunter Henry he's competing with. He's just competing with the other outside wide receivers right now. So Kayshon Boutte should have another strong week, only 0.30 fantasy points per route run. He needs to get that up for me to really care, but he's going against perhaps the worst defense in the league right now, Miami, and Miami's worst cornerback, Jack Jones, dude, okay? Just because you name your kid 2 consecutive the same letters does not mean they're going to be a superhero or a very good sports star. They can be the worst cornerback on their team. So this guy plays on one side 85% of the time. So Kayshon Boutte will only have that matchup, 40+% of the time? So it's not like an extremely good matchup. I'd want to see him matched up with that worst cornerback more often, but he will get some opportunities. This cornerback was only targeted 16% of the time last time. I want that to be higher if I'm really targeting this cornerback. But again, dude, 0.36 fantasy points per route run this guy's given up. Kayshon Boutte, you got him. You paid for him. You should start him. All right. And then Chris Olave, this fool got like 15 targets, and he only had a 58% route participation. How many targets would this guy have had if that was like an 80%? That'd have been like 25 targets. Okay, so Chris Olave, as far as the only option on this team besides the tight end and Alvin Kamara, he is the wide receiver to own. So Spencer Rattler, as long as he's back there, this is not going to change. He plays in the slot and on one side quite a bit. He skips the right side of the field for the most part, only 14%. And dude, again, when he was running routes last week, 25% target share. That is elite. Only 0.30 fantasy points per route run. I do not like that. That needs to get up to like 0.45 for me to start carrying a lot for him to be a wide receiver 1. But hey, we're talking wide receiver 2 flex, like PPR machine right now. And he's going to be going against San Francisco's worst cornerback, Renardo Green. Okay, so he's the right cornerback. He got targeted 20% of the time last time by Sam Darnold. So that's close to that 21% that we are looking for. And he gave up 0.35 fantasy points per route run. Holy shit. That is a great matchup. And then lastly, okay, the last great matchup is Deebo Samuel that I'm going to talk about today, because I'm interested to see if he's going to keep this going. Terry McLaurin did not do well against the Giants in the 2 games last year. He had those 2 touchdowns, but yardage and targets wise was not the case. So I'm looking for Terry McLaurin to take a step up, and maybe Deebo Samuel to take a backseat to the true wide receiver number 1. And then Deebo Samuel was the slot wide receiver. He had a 78% route participation. I want that to be 85%. And let's see, dude, he was targeted 34.5% of the time. Look at this column. That's like, Isaac Tesla had a 7% route participation, so that doesn't really count. But Deebo Samuel, man, 78% route participation with a 35% target share. Holy shit. That is insane. And he did well with it, dude. Almost elite category, almost elite territory. 0.51 fantasy points per route run. If that was 0.55, I'd say that's elite. All right. And now he's going against Green Bay. Dude, Green Bay looked so good last week. But he gets their worst cornerback, their slot cornerback, Javon Bullard. He's in there 87% of the time. Deebo's in the slot 80% of the time. He's giving up 0.33 fantasy points per route run. Holy shit. Deebo Samuel is should be top 24 this week. All right, let's get into the worst matchups for week 2. All right, first off, we got a rookie, Matthew Golden. Did you see they just extended Christian Watson? Gave him a contract extension. So once Christian Watson comes back, I'm interested to see what happens there. But hey, for right now, dude, this rookie only had a 43% route participation. So they kept him on the sidelines quite a bit this last game in his first game, getting his nose wet, so they say. 30% on the left side, 50% on the right side, 20% in the slot. So they were moving him around quite a bit. Only 0.33 fantasy points per route run. Well, he gets Washington's best cornerback right now. Trey Amos. He plays on one side 84% of the time, and that is where Matthew Golden is 50% of the time. So they will be matched up together quite a bit. And he was only targeted 10% of the time. All right. So you look at all these guys right here, the best cornerbacks, other than Will Johnson, the Arizona right cornerback, the quarterbacks do not target that side. So right now, Trey Amos, keeping Matthew Golden out of my lineup for this week. And then here we go, man. Next up, Romeo Doubs. I was watching that game, and Romeo Doubs was doing better than I thought. He looked like the number 1 wide receiver out there. He was running much more routes than Matthew Golden. So Matthew Golden was at 44%. Romeo Doubs at 75%. And he stays on the outside. I want to say he was way more in the slot this year, but not this year on the outside. He had a 25% target share, dude. So when Romeo Doubs was healthy last year, his target share was actually pretty damn good. And it picked up right where it left off at 25%. That is elite. 0.49 fantasy points per route run. He actually did something with his target share, dude. So very good as far as that goes. Then he is matched up against Marshawn Lattimore. Okay. And I almost put Malik Neighbors on the bench or wide receiver 2-3 category last week on my bad matchups because he was going against Marshawn Lattimore. And the way that Lattimore ended the year last year was like Patrick Surtain, dude. So right here, look, Patrick Surtain and Marshawn Lattimore are right next to each other with very similar numbers. So Lattimore likes to shadow, but right now he's matched up with Romeo Doubs. So Romeo Doubs, to me, right now, I'm keeping him out of my starting lineup. 10%, he was only targeted Marshawn Lattimore. So opposing quarterbacks only threw, a couple balls his way, and they did not do much with it because he only gave up 0.14 fantasy points per route run. Oh my God, Romeo Doubs, get out of my life. Tyreek Hill next up, man. Is he going to bounce back? Does anybody want to trade for him? Well, he's got a bad matchup, so you're going to have to wait another week if you drafted him, okay? 74% route participation. When he was number 1 wide receiver in the NFL, dude, that was 90%. So I don't like to start the first game, only 74%. That sucks. And they move him all around. That's like Jamar Chase. So I love that. 24% target share when he was running routes. So that is elite. And then 0.44, that is very good. So if you got to 0.55, that is elite. So Tyreek Hill just not being targeted and not running a ton of routes, even though he is still very good. And he's going against New England's best cornerback, Alex Austin. And he sticks to the one side the most, which is where Tyreek Hill runs the most routes, but still, they're going to be seeing a lot of each other. And he was only targeted 15% of the time for the most part and only gave up 0.14 fantasy points per route run. So Tyreek Hill, if you didn't like him last week, I wouldn't like him this week. Next up, we got King Tet, dude, the rookie that I drafted. Looked amazing. I mean, he got stripped on a big touchdown pass that would have really boosted his week and people would be talking about him. He almost had a 90% target share. Route participation. 90% is elite. That is what we're chasing for, man. And he had 87.5. So look at this. Jameson Williams at 91, Jerry Jeudy at 90. But again, dude, for the most part, all these are way below him. I love that. He's on the outside. He's not in the slot, even though they do run him in the slot a little bit at 14%. 23% target share. Again, we want that to be 24 plus. Very close for a rookie's first game, man. And then 0.33 fantasy points per route run. That is just okay. I expect that number to go up. That was a terrible game, dude. A terrible game by anybody. They didn't even score any points. So it will get better as the year goes on, just because I believe in Dave Canales more than I believe in Bryce Young, dude. So, and he's matched up against Arizona's worst cornerback, Will Johnson, man. He does not even play any slot. He's only on the outsides. He was targeted almost 19% of the time, dude. That is the highest right here. So offenses were targeting him, even though he was a great cornerback. But he only gave up 0.16 fantasy points per route run. I do not think they're going to be targeting him that much this week. But King Tet, dude, there's nobody else, man. They shipped off everybody else. He will get his targets. I don't think he's going to do much with it. I think he's going to be a wide receiver 2 again this week with very similar numbers to what he did last week. Next up, dude, Terry McLaurin, 84% route participation. That's going to be 85 plus, 87 plus once he gets in the building for more than 2 weeks, okay? So he just signed right before the season started. That is my only explanation to why his route participation was so low. And, dude, his fantasy points per route run and his target share were god-awful as well. So, again, man, the 2 games versus New York Giants last year, very similar, except he caught 2 touchdowns one game. Other than that, dude, it was like 40 yards in each game. So something about that matchup, even though he gets Deonte Banks, is not great. So I expect this to flip this week. And he's getting Green Bay's, one of their best cornerbacks, dude, Carrington Valentine. He's on one side 90% of the time. It's the same side that Terry's on 67% of the time. So they're going to be seeing a lot of each other. And he was only targeted, dude, 8%. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. So a lot of that is because, he's the outside cornerback on the deep target. And Detroit had no time to throw the ball versus Green Bay last week. Only 0.16 fantasy points per route run given up. Terry McLaurin, man, I think he's not going to bounce back all the way. He's going to do better than he did last week, but that's not saying much, dude. Low-end wide receiver 2 this week. All right, real quick, let's go over the schemes that these wide receivers will be facing to see if it takes away our confidence or maybe reinforces it. Amon-Ra St. Brown versus Chicago. He is much better versus man, 0.72 fantasy points per route run versus what he does versus zone at 0.54. Chicago plays zone the 7th most, so not great for Amon-Ra St. Brown, but he is still elite versus zone, so I'm not too worried there. Devonta Smith versus Kansas City, 0.46 and 0.45 versus man and zone, so very close to the he does not do better at man or zone. Kansas City plays man, the 7th most. We'll pay attention to that later. Kayshon Boutte versus Miami. He is amazing versus man, 0.47. Dude, versus zone, not good at all. Miami plays man and zone at an average NFL rate, so nothing to see there. He's still going to be the most targeted wide receiver here. Young upside with a great matchup versus Miami. Chris Olave versus San Francisco. He does the same versus man versus zone, 0.43 and 0.41. San Francisco plays zone, the 11th most in the NFL, so nothing really there either. Deebo Samuel, again, dude, does the same man versus zone, 0.35, 0.33. Green Bay plays heavy zone. We'll pay attention to that some other time. Worst matchups, Matthew Golden, he's a rookie, so we don't know yet. I'm going on some older data because PFF does not have their man versus zone until like Fridays or Saturdays. So I will be able to do better next week. Washington plays man and zone at average rate, so nothing to see there. Romeo Doubs versus Washington. He is much better versus man, 0.55, than he is versus zone, so almost twice as much better, as efficient, I should say. But Washington plays man and zone at an average rate, so nothing to see there either, dude. Now, Tyreek Hill, of course, is better versus man. He's the fastest man alive. Then he is at zone. And New England plays man the second most in the NFL. So Tyreek Hill, I do not like it at all. He's got a bad matchup. But the scheme that they play over there in New England actually benefits Tyreek Hill still. He's a flex option for me right now, and I'd be scared about that. King Tet, he's a rookie. Arizona plays zone 13th most. So we will know more about King Tet next week. And then Terry McLaurin, all right? He's much better versus man than he is versus zone, and Green Bay plays zone, the 8th most in the NFL at 73%. So Terry McLaurin, I do think he will bounce back this week, right? But he's got a bad matchup, and he's going against a bad scheme. So it can't be much worse than it was last week. Hey, if you've got any matchups that you want to know about, please comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I earned a thumbs up, man. We need it. That gets us seen by more people. Chain reaction. Be part of this chain, dog. I think I said that last time. Hey, hopefully I earned a subscription. I'm out here on the street corners on my knees begging for this stuff, dude. Please subscribe. Helps us out tremendously. That's exactly what we need right now. This is Tyler Big Turd Ward. This is the Fantasy Red Zone, and we appreciate